you pray with me? Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and meditations in our hearts and minds this day be acceptable in your sight, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Last Monday, I traveled down to Wheaton, Illinois, to meet my newest great-nephew, who was 2 weeks old, and I had some fun with his 3-year-old sister, who's a little bit jealous right now. When I left their home in Wheaton, I headed east on Roosevelt Road and drove through Lombard, my hometown, the town where I lived from age 3 to 23. Now, there were a few familiar places along Roosevelt Road, and there were some familiar buildings that now housed different businesses, and there were a whole lot of brand new buildings and businesses. Time rolled through Lombard and changed many things. Now, I haven't been back to Lombard much in the 28 years since my parents moved out of their house there, just a handful of times. So when I think of Lombard, admittedly, I think of the town I knew 40 years ago. I tend to think of Lombard as it was, not as it is today. And that seems to be what's going on in our story from Mark. Jesus shows up in his hometown and begins to teach in the synagogue there. Now, the text tells us that the people are astounded. They're shocked. And they're offended. Just who does Jesus think he is? Well, they know who he is. He's Mary's son. He's the carpenter's kid. He grew up in this town. What gives him the right to think he can come back and teach in the synagogue as though he has authority? The people in Jesus' hometown knew him well. And it was most likely considered an act of arrogance for someone of Jesus' lowly origins to come and speak out publicly in the synagogue. Jesus' new role did not fit with the people's past experience of him, and they could not accept it. Their preconceived notions of him acted like kryptonite. You remember kryptonite, right? Kryptonite, it was the only thing that could rob Superman of his powers. And it was from his home planet. Folks, in his hometown, Jesus could do no deeds of power. And I love the next line, except for curing a few sick people. But nothing exceptional. No real deeds of power. He just cures the sick, but nothing, Now, 2 weeks ago, we heard the story of the Gerasene demoniac, the man who was possessed by evil spirits, who lived among the tombstones, howling and bruising himself. And Jesus called the evil spirits out of the man, and when the townspeople found the man clothed and in his right mind, they were scared, and they asked Jesus to leave. And the man begged to go with Jesus, but Jesus said, no, you go back and witness to the people about what you've experienced. I think maybe the man was afraid that his hometown people would never be able to see him as the transformed person he was. To them, he would always be the crazy naked guy in the graveyard. Maybe they, like the people in Jesus' hometown, wouldn't be able to see past the past, to see beyond their preconceived ideas of what they thought they knew. And then last week, it's quite the opposite story in Mark. Jesus performs 2 amazing healings. Just before Jesus enters his hometown, a woman is healed of a 12-year ailment just by touching Jesus' garment. And Jesus says to her, your faith has made you well. And Jesus says to Jairus, a leader in the synagogue, do not fear, only believe. And Jairus' daughter is brought back to life from the dead. These are strong stories of power and grace and faith. And the people in these stories see something more than a simple carpenter when they look at Jesus. They believe Jesus can help them. And they experience life-changing events. I wonder how sometimes our preconceived ideas block us from experiencing powerful moments of grace. I wonder if we sometimes close our minds and our hearts in ways that prevent Jesus' power from working in this world. If trapped by our perceptions from the past, we sometimes fail to see the possibility of anything new or different in the future. Now, in the next part of the story, Jesus calls the 12 disciples together and sends them out in pairs, giving them authority over the unclean spirits. Do you see what's happening here? Do you see what's happening here? Jesus is transferring his power to his disciples. And for Mark, writing, as the early church struggled, this implies that Jesus is transferring his power to the early church, to those followers of the way. And as I mentioned last week, quoting Tony Campolo, Jesus' power lies in the depth of his love. Love that has the power to transform lives. Love that has the power to bring healing. Jesus transfers that power to his followers. And he gives them some very specific instructions as they go out. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in their belts, to wear sandals, and not to put on 2 tunics. Now, I have to confess, when I read this part about wearing sandals and not putting on 2 tunics, I thought of our daughter as she recently packed to go and live in South Africa for 3 months. She had a very large suitcase, but she's very good at packing lightly and efficiently because she's traveled a lot. But on this trip, she was bringing her rock climbing gear and her hiking boots, and when she weighed her suitcase, it was slightly overweight. Thus, the rearranging began. Bottom line, it looked like we would be putting her on the plane wearing 2 shirts and a jacket and hiking boots, whether she needed them or not. You know, come on, who doesn't do that? You know, we didn't fly a lot until our daughter moved out to Oregon, but, you know, I don't wear the flip-flops on the plane. I wear the heavy gym shoes, right? You know, you wear your heavy coat even if you don't need it, because in my case, I'm not efficient. I can't jam one more thing in my suitcase. Wear sandals, says Jesus, and not 2 tunics. Pack light. Trust God. Trust the kindness of others. Perhaps Jesus knew also that the disciples were going in with an incredible power. An incredible power, love, that heals. Being dependent on others for housing and for food brought them some humility, some vulnerability. Rather than looking powerful in every respect, there would be a give and take. They would take care of each other. The disciples would perform deeds of healing, and the people would provide sustenance for them. And when we are sent out as disciples of Jesus, there is a need for trust, for humility, for vulnerability. I got up this morning and I had a notification on my narrative lectionary chat group, and one of the other pastors had posted this morning, you know, I woke up thinking about this scripture and thinking that today would Jesus send us out without our cell phones. Talk about vulnerability. She said, you know how many times I have gone back to get my cell phone? When we are sent out as disciples of Jesus, there's a need for trust, for humility, for vulnerability. Jesus goes on to say, whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. If any place will not welcome you and they refuse to hear you as you leave, shake off the dust that's on your feet as a testimony against them. Well, what does this mean? Accept the hospitality that's offered to you. Don't try to trade up, folks. If If you find yourselves unwelcome in a village as Jesus was in his hometown, move on. Jesus knew what it felt like to be rejected. Jesus also knew that his disciples would experience rejection as they carried on his mission. He knew that not everybody would be ready or willing to hear the word and receive their message. So he warns the disciples and instructs them not to give up as he sends them out. And in the words of a very overplayed song, let it go, let it go. Shake the dust off your feet and keep moving. Go to the next place. If you use imagery from some of Jesus' parables, your job is to plant the seeds, folks. Leave the growing to God. Keep going. Plant the seeds of the kingdom wherever you can. If the soil is receptive, great. If it's not, then move on and find more receptive soil. To use another metaphor, if I offer you a gift, you can receive it or you can leave it. But I can't force you to take my gift. As followers of Jesus, we've been given the gift of a powerful, life-changing love. And we've been sent out to share that love with others, to transform lives. So will we accept the gift and the calling? I wonder. I wonder if our preconceived ideas about people or situations will block us from offering powerful moments of grace. I wonder if we sometimes close our minds and or hearts in ways that prevent Jesus' power from working through us in this world. I wonder if, trapped by our perceptions and experiences from the past, we will fail to see the possibilities of the future. Example: homelessness is a huge problem in many areas of our country. And I have sometimes heard people comment, more than once I've heard this comment, on the fact that despite multiple efforts to help, some people just seem to choose to remain on the streets. They just still go back to that lifestyle. And yes, that's true. It's absolutely true. Some people make that choice. But let's not let our minds and our hearts close to those who are really trying. Let's not say, well, we tried to help before, but they don't want our help. They'd rather stay on the streets. Let's not automatically form stereotypes and prejudices about people. Some seeds fall in places where they don't take hold, folks. Let it go and keep going. Don't let it stop you from sowing more seeds. Keep your heart open and your spirit receptive to the Spirit. God has transferred the power of deep, deep, healing, transforming love to us. That's a lot of power. And God has sent us out to share it, to use it, to change lives and to change this world. So let's keep going. Jesus knew what rejection was like. There were places where Jesus could do no deeds of power, folks. But there were plenty of places where he changed lives with the power of God's love. And he kept going all the way to the cross, all the way to the ultimate rejection. And we have been claimed by the God of love. We have been called and sent out to live out God's love. And the world desperately needs us to keep going and to keep sowing. Amen.
Amen.